So in the traditional story, when Savitri reaches a certain age and nobody has asked her hand in marriage, then her father advises her to go out herself and do a tour of all the princes and see if she can find the destined partner. Sri Aurobindo tells it a little differently. This is the canto where we hear about the call to the quest, Savitri's quest for her life partner. A morn that seemed a new creation's front, bringing a greater sunlight, happier skies, came burdened with a beauty moved and strange, out of the changeless origin of things. An ancient longing struck again new roots. The air drank deep of unfulfilled desire. The high trees trembled with a wandering wind, like souls that quiver at the approach of joy. And in a bosom of green secrecy, forever of its one love note untired, a lyric coil cried among the leaves. Away from the terrestrial murmur turned, where transient calls and answers mix their flood, King Asvapati listened through the ray to other sounds than meet the sense-formed ear. On a subtle interspace which rings our life, unlocked were the inner spirit's trance-closed doors. The inaudible strain in nature could be caught. Across this cyclic tramp of eager lives, across the deep urgency of present cares, Earth's wordless hymn to the ineffable arose from the silent heart of the cosmic void. He heard the voice repressed of unborn powers murmuring behind the luminous bars of time. Again, the mighty yearning raised its flame that asks a perfect life on earth for men, and prays for certainty in the uncertain mind, and shadowless bliss for suffering human hearts, and truth embodied in an ignorant world, and Godhead divinizing mortal forms. A word that leaped from some far sky of thought, admitted by the cowled receiving scribe, traversed the echoing passages of his brain and left its stamp on the recording cells. So I'll stop there. We'll have a look first at this introductory passage.
The one that seemed a new creation for front, bringing a greater sunlight, their skies came burdened with a beauty moved and strange out of the changeless origin of things.
So a morning that seemed the beginning of a new creation, the front, the beginning or the face of a new creation, bringing a greater sunlight. There was something special, larger and brighter about the sunlight that day, and the skies seemed to be happier, a brighter blue, greater radiance. So that morning brought the greater sunlight and happier skies, and it came burdened, it's carrying something. A burden is a load, no? Carrying a beauty, moved and strange, not an earthly beauty, a beauty that has come out of the changeless origin of things, like from the very beginning, before the creation of the world, something fresh and new and moved. It means it's full of emotion. There's some intensity, some passion in it.
An ancient longing struck again new roots. The air drank deep of unfulfilled desire. The high trees trembled with a wandering wind, like souls that quiver at the approach of joy. And in a bosom of green secrecy, for ever of its one love note, untired, the lyric coil cried among the leaves.
So it's one of those special mornings that we feel sometimes in the springtime when with all that newness and brightness, all the old aspirations come up again. This ancient longing. And he says, struck again new roots. That's what plants do in the springtime. You know, they've been conserving their strength, but then the brighter sunlight comes and the happier skies, and they strike out new roots. They're going to grow beautiful and strong. And the air seems to be drinking deep of unfulfilled desire, some kind of promise of longing. The high trees trembled. The leaves just move a little bit, no? With a wandering wind. And he says it's like the quivering of souls feeling that a new joy is approaching them. And in a bosom of green secrecy, among the leaves, as if it's in a heart there, a lyric coil cried among the leaves. Coil is a bird, and it's the bird in India that represents love. Here he writes it coil. It's Kuilapalayam, no? That's those birds are supposed to be many there. Varadarajan tells me they are many, but one doesn't see them. They are hiding there in this bosom of green secrecy. You just hear the note of their song. And just in Europe we talk about the nightingale. That's the song that it's expressing its love. But in India they feel that call of the kuil is the love note. So he says a lyric coil. A lyric is a song, and especially a love song. So that bird is singing its one note over and over and over again. So those are the signs that are there in nature. No, the brighter sunlight, the happier skies, the trembling leaves, the wonderful air as if it's full of something, no? And the sound of the birds. But Aswapati is not paying attention to that. He's turned inwards.
Away from the terrestrial murmur turned, where tranquil calls and answers mixed their blood, King Ashwapati listened to the rain, to other sounds than meet the sense-formed ear.
So all that terrestrial murmur, all the sounds of the earth, he's turned away from that. All the noises of earth, where transient calls and answers mix their flood. The bird is calling, its mate is answering. There are so many calls and so many different kinds of answers, and all these get mixed, and it makes that noise, that rumour of life. But King Aswapati is not listening to that. He is turned inwards. He's listening through the ray, maybe the ray of inner illumination. And he's listening for other sounds, not the sounds that meet our sense-formed ear. The sounds that one hears when one's concentrated deep within. Ganga Lakshmi?
On the subtle interspace which rings our life, and locked away the inner spirit's trance closed doors. The inaudible stream in nature called be caught across this cyclic trunk of finger
Lives.
Across the deep urgency of the present chaos. Earth's wander wordless hymn to the ineffable, the rose from the silent heart of the cosmic void. He heard the voice repress of unborn power, murmuring behind the luminous veil of time.
Thank you. So Sri Aurobindo tells us that there's a subtle interspace surrounding our lives, not a material space, but a subtle space between everything. And for Aswapati, that space is unlocked. The inner spirit's doors are unlocked. Normally, they're held within in a state of trance, of sleep, deep inner concentration. But now they are opened, and he can hear the inaudible strain in nature. What cannot be heard, something that can be heard is audible, you can hear it. Inaudible. There's as if there's a kind of inaudible music, a strain, it's a line of melody. As if in nature, if we can listen closely enough, if our ears get unlocked to that subtle interspace, we can hear that inaudible strain in nature. Aswapati can hear it. And he hears that across this sound that's made by this cyclic tramp of eager lives. Tramping is when you walk heavily, the sound of soldiers marching. It's a tramp. Tramp, tramp. And this tramp that he's speaking about, this sound, is cyclic. It's going round and round and round and round. All these lives being born and dying and being born again. It's a kind of monotonous sound. But in all those lives there's some eagerness, some enthusiasm that makes them go on tramping. Beyond that he can hear something. and he can hear beyond the deep urgency of present cares. In our life we always have some cares, some anxieties, some worries, and then they won't leave us alone. They keep coming back and occupying us. But he's listening beyond all that. He hears earth's wordless hymn to the ineffable, as if out of the heart of the earth there's a beautiful sacred song going up to the Supreme, to the one who is beyond all expression, about whom nothing can be said. No? Earth is aspiring with a song, but that song has no words, and that song is rising up from the silent heart of the cosmic void, the universal emptiness. Perhaps the earth is the heart of the universal emptiness from the psychic point of view. No? The earth represents the soul of the material universe. So this aspiration is going up. He hears that, and he hears also the voice of unborn powers, new possibilities that have not yet been manifested. He can hear them murmuring behind the bars of time. They're as if in prison, that the gate is barred and it's not yet allowed them to come into time. And he can hear their voices not very clearly. Their voices are repressed, sort of kept back. They are only murmuring. But he can see these luminous bars of time. Behind them there are these unborn powers waiting. Shiva.
Again, the mighty yearnings raised its fame. It had asked perfect life on earth for men, and praised for certainty in the uncertain mind, and shadowless bliss for suffering human hearts, and truth embodied in an ignorant world, and guarded, divinizing mortal forms.
So this was King Aswapati's aspiration, his yearning, that had made him undertake all that great journey. No? And he reached the Supreme Divine Mother, and she granted him the birth of the daughter. And now that daughter has grown up. Maybe she's 18 years old, perhaps. No? And now he remembers that aspiration and that yearning all over again. The mighty yearning, and it rises up like a flame of aspiration. No? He's asking for a perfect life on earth for men. The aspiration for the divine life here in the material world. And that flame of aspiration, it prays for certainty in the uncertain mind. That's one of the things that we miss most, that we can never be sure of anything. No? And asks for shadowless bliss, even for these suffering human hearts. That's what he wanted to bring here. And truth embodied, living in living forms, the truth embodied here in what is still an ignorant world. And Godhead, the presence of the individualized divinity that would make our mortal forms also divine. It's a wonderful expression of Aswapati's aspiration. Joel.
A word that leaped from some far sky of thought, admitted by the cold receiving scribe, traversed the echoing passages of his brain, and left its stamp on the recording cells.
So there's a word, a message comes down, and it seems to come from a very high level, from some far sky of thought, and it comes leaping down, and it is allowed into Aswapati's mind by this cowled, receiving scribe. In our mind, it's as if we have somebody sitting there at a desk and receiving all the messages coming in. We can't see who that scribe is. He has a hood over his face, but he notes down all the messages that come in. So that message comes down, it's allowed to enter, and it passed through the echoing passages of his brain. The thought comes in, and as it comes in, it leaves its stamp, leaves its mark on those recording brain cells. So it gets somehow then translated into words. Marvelous words. It's a long speech. We won't finish it today. It goes over onto page 372. But very, very important message for all of us. Gumsung, you would read, please?
A force compelled, fated, driven Earth's own race. O pity adventures in an infinite world, and prisoners aboard dwarf humanity. How long will you take the circling tracks of mine around your little self and petty things?
So he's speaking to us. No? Oh, you earth-born race, you're driven by force, even the divine force, compelled to act in a certain way, and fate drives you. And he says, you are petty adventurers in an infinite world. Yes, we are always seeking and searching for things, but on such a small scale compared with this infinite world we live in. And in a way, we are prisoners of this dwarf humanity, dwarf on a very small scale. That is the nature of our race in its present evolution. The voice says, how long are you going to go on like this? Treading these circling tracks of mind, round and round and round, around your little self. That's what we think about most of the time, no? How are things going for us and how we have to organize things. And petty things, small things. How long are you going to go on like this? Mahalingam.
But not for a changeless littleness where you live, not for vain repetition where you build. Out of the immortal substance you are made. Your actions can be shaped to revealing steps. Your life is a changeful mold for growing God.
So he says you're not meant for this changeless littleness circling round and round. You weren't created, you weren't constructed for this vain repetition over and over again, the same thing without any purpose. You were made out of the immortal substance. We have a nature being, but even this is made out of the substance of the Supreme. And he says, your actions can be swift, revealing steps, can show new things. Instead of being petty adventurers, you can open up new paths. Your life can be a changeful mold for growing gods. Within each of us there's a God growing, and our life could be an expression of the shape that those gods can take. That's the possibility. That's what that voice comes to remind us. Patricia.
A seer, a strong creator is within.
the immaculate grandeur broods upon your days. Almighty powers are shut in nature's cells.
You read the next sentence as well.
A greater destiny waits you in your front. This transient earthly being, if he wills, can fit his acts to a transcendent scheme.
So within all of us, there's a seer, a rishi, one who can see, even a creator, one who has creative power, and the immaculate grandeur, that absolutely pure greatness which is beyond, is brooding, is hanging over us like a mother bird, wanting us to hatch out of our eggs, out of our dwarf humanity, and become something much greater. Even in these cells of nature, these physical cells, almighty powers are there. They're shut up inside. And ahead of us, in our front, a greater destiny is waiting for us. This transient earthly being, this ordinary human being who won't live long, if he wills, if he really wants to, he can fit his acts to a transcendent scheme. This is the great opportunity that's offered to us, that we can make our actions be in harmony with that great transcendent scheme, the divine plan.
He who now stares at the world with ignorant eyes, heartily from the inconscious night rose, that look at images and not at truth, can fill those orbs with an immortal sight.
Yes. The one, he, the one that is us, all of us, who now stare at the world. We look around us with ignorant eyes, and we don't really see it the way it is, because our eyes have hardly woken up from that night of inconscience. We're still at an early stage of evolution. So these eyes of ours, our physical eyes, they look at images, mental images of the world around, not at truth. And yet, these orbs, these eyes of ours, can be filled with the sight of our immortal being that is within us. Tatiana.
Yet shall the Godhead grow within your hearts. You shall awake into the Spirit's air and feel the breaking walls of mortal mind, and hear the message which left life's path dumb, and look through nature with sun-gazing lids, and blow your conch shells with the Eternal's gate.
So he says, yet shall, it will happen in the future, it's going to happen. The Godhead within your hearts is going to grow, and you will wake up into the Spirit's air, and you'll feel all these limitations of mortal mind, these walls here, breaking down, crumbling down, and then you will hear the message, this message which the whole universe is giving us, but our heart, the life heart, which is occupied with all the sensations and the desires, it doesn't respond to that message. No? You will be able to look through nature, through all these surface appearances, with sun-gazing lids. Lids again is the eyelids, So it's a word for eyes. Eyes, our physical eyes can't look straight at the sun for a long time. No? But our inner eyes can look straight at the sun without being dazzled. No? And you shall blow your conch shells at the Eternal's gate. We stand outside his gate and blow, we are here, we are here. No? The wonderful sound of the conch shell. No? The priests blow in the temple, or the warriors blow on the battlefield to say, we are here, let us in. No? Suresh.
Authors of Earth's high chain to you, it is given to cross the dangerous space of the soul and touch the mighty mother stop away and make the omnipotent in this house of flesh and make of life the million bodied on.
Million-bodied.
Million-bodied on.
One. Yeah. So he says, you people, you human beings, it's your job to change the earth. You are the authors, the one who have to bring about earth's high change. It's up to you. You are the ones who have been given the task. To you it is given to cross the dangerous spaces of the soul and touch the mighty mother stark awake. The mighty mother must be the supreme mother in the form of the earth. So you have to wake her up. That's your task. Wake her up fully, stark awake. You are given the destiny to meet the all-powerful, the Supreme Lord, here in this house of flesh. And it's your task to make of life, this little petty life, you have to turn this into the million-bodied one, the one supreme expressed in all these billions, actually, of bodies that live on the earth. Or that he lives in them all on the earth. This is the task of humanity. I'd read a sentence. The earth you tread is a border screened from heaven. The life you lead conceals the light you are. Immortal powers sweep flaming past your doors. Far off upon your tops the God chant sounds, while to exceed yourselves thoughts trumpets call, heard by a few, but fewer dare aspire, the nympholets of the ecstasy and the blaze. So this earth that we are walking on, this material earth, is a border line which is somehow veiled, screened from heaven. And this life we are leading is hiding the light that we really are, the inner light that we really are. We are not aware of these immortal powers sweeping, flaming past our doors, we don't even notice them, these great powers. He says, far off upon your tops, on the very highest level of our being and our nature, there's something always singing the praises and the calling to the divine. The God chant sounds, as if the higher levels of our being are mountains, and at the top of those mountains there are sages singing always the praises of the Lord. And thought's trumpets are calling us to exceed ourselves. If you're in the army in the morning, the trumpets sound and you have to wake up and you have to go and do your best, no? So it's as if the higher levels of our thought are calling us. They're blowing their trumpets and saying, wake up, become more than what you are. That's the role of human beings. Many great thinkers have told us to exceed yourselves, to become more than what you are now. But those trumpets of thought, they are only heard by a few. And out of those, even fewer dare to really aspire to be more than what they are. Those few, he says, are the nympholepts of the ecstasy and the blaze. It means people who are in love with something that seems unattainable, that can't be reached. Nympholepts. I think he uses this word in 2 places in the poem. The ones who really aspire, they can't help it. Their hearts are just worshipping that ecstasy and that blaze on the higher levels. You read the next sentence, Rosa?
Yes. An epic of hope and failure breaks fruits its heart, her force and will exceed her form and fate.
So he says, Earth's heart is broken. She's in despair. She's lost all her courage. It's this epic story that goes on and on and on of hope and failure. She has so much strength and so much will for such great things. But here she is. She's bound, he says somewhere, by the hoops of fate, all the material determinisms. She can't achieve what is in her heart to achieve. And Donna Lakshmi.
A goddess in a net of transience caught, self-bound in the postures of death, she dreams of life, self-racked with the pains of hell, aspires to joy, and builds to put her altars of despair, knows that one high step might enfranchise all, and suffering looks for greatness in her sons.
So the earth is a goddess. Although she's immortal, she's trapped in this net of transience, of mortality, of death. She's accepted this fate, self-bound in the pastures of death. She's accepted this fate, but she's dreaming of life, divine life. And she's suffering. She's really suffering so much. Self-wrecked with the pains of hell. How much the earth is suffering. But she's aspiring to joy. And so she builds her altars, she creates these places of worship to hope. But in herself she knows that just one big step, one high step, might set everything and everyone free, enfranchise, set them free. And so she suffers. She thinks, why doesn't it happen? Why aren't human beings great enough to take this step? Suffering, she looks for greatness in her sons. We are her sons. She needs us to be great to bring about this high change, because we are the authors of Earth's high change.
But dim in human hearts the ascending fire, the invisible grandeur sits unworshipped there. Man sees the highest in a limiting form, or looks upon a person, hears a name.
Can you continue, Martin?
He turns for little gains to ignorant powers, or kindles his altar lights to a demon face. He loves the ignorance, fathering his pain.
So this is the problem. This fire of aspiration is very dim in human hearts. It's not bright and brilliant and strong. And that invisible grandeur, that greatness, is not worshipped in our hearts. He's sitting there in our hearts, but we don't worship him. We don't offer sacrifices to him. Man, the mental being, imagines the highest in a limiting form. Or he looks upon a person. We think even Sri Aurobindo or Jesus Christ or whoever we think, no? He hears a name. And if man prays for anything, he's praying for little things. And he prays not to the highest, but to the ignorant powers, the vital powers that may or may not give him what he wants. No? And maybe he even lights the fire on his altar to a demon face, to an adverse power. That also happens. He loves the ignorance, fathering his pain. Where does the pain come from? The father of pain and suffering and evil and falsehood and all that is ignorance. And we cling to that ignorance for some reason, some strange reason. I'm going to stop there for today. Shall we read this whole passage? A morn that seemed a new creation's front, bringing a greater sunlight, happier skies, came burdened with a beauty moved and strange out of the changeless origin of things. An ancient longing struck again new roots. The air drank deep of unfulfilled desire. The high trees trembled with a wandering wind, like souls that quiver at the approach of joy. And in a bosom of green secrecy, forever of its one love note untired, a lyric coil cried among the leaves. Away from the terrestrial murmur turned, where transient calls and answers mix their flood, King Aswapati listened through the ray to other sounds than meet the sense-formed ear. On a subtle interspace which rings our life, unlocked were the inner spirit's trance-closed doors. The inaudible strain in nature could be caught. Across this cyclic tramp of eager lives, across the deep urgency of present cares, earth's wordless hymn to the ineffable arose from the silent heart of the cosmic void. He heard the voice repressed of unborn powers murmuring behind the luminous bars of time. Again the mighty yearning raised its flame that asks a perfect life on earth for men, and prays for certainty in the uncertain mind, and shadowless bliss for suffering human hearts, and truth embodied in an ignorant world, and Godhead divinizing mortal forms. A word that leaped from some far sky of thought, admitted by the cowled receiving scribe, traversed the echoing passages of his brain and left its stamp on the recording cells. O force-compelled, fate-driven, earth-born race! O petty adventurers in an infinite world, and prisoners of a dwarf humanity, how long will you tread the circling tracks of mind around your little self and petty things? But not for a changeless littleness were you meant, not for vain repetition were you built. Out of the immortal substance you were made. Your actions can be swift revealing steps, your life a changeful mould for growing gods. A seer, a strong creator is within. The immaculate grandeur broods upon your days. Almighty powers are shut in nature's cells. A greater destiny waits you in your front. This transient earthly being, if he wills, can fit his acts to a transcendent scheme. He who now stares at the world with ignorant eyes, hardly from the inconscience night aroused, that look at images and not at truth, can fill those orbs with an immortal sight. Yet shall the Godhead grow within your hearts. You shall awake into the Spirit's air, and feel the breaking walls of mortal mind, and hear the message which left life's heart dumb, and look through nature with sun-gazing lids, and blow your conch shells at the Eternal's gate. Authors of earth's high change, to you it is given to cross the dangerous spaces of the soul and touch the mighty Mother stark awake, and meet the Omnipotent in this house of flesh, and make of life the million-bodied one. The earth you tread is a border screened from heaven. The life you lead conceals the light you are. Immortal powers sweep flaming past your doors. Far off upon your tops the God chant sounds, while to exceed yourselves thoughts trumpets call, heard by a few, but fewer dare aspire. The nympholepts of the ecstasy and the blaze. An epic of hope and failure breaks earth's heart. Her force and will exceed her form and fate. A goddess in a net of transience caught, self-bound in the pastures of death, she dreams of life. Self-wrecked with the pains of hell, aspires to joy, and builds to hope her altars of despair. Knows that one high step might enfranchise all, and suffering looks for greatness in her sons. But dim in human hearts the ascending fire. The invisible grandeur sits unworshipped there. Man sees the highest in a limiting form, or looks upon a person, hears a name. He turns for little gains to ignorant powers, or kindles his altar lights to a demon face. He loves the ignorance fathering his pain,